independence, but they know that holds well with Americans. Americans want energy independence going forward. They also have been talking a lot about clean energy. And so part of it is to put it to any candidate, exactly what would you do for clean energy? And I think for me, the bellwether is not just, putting a little bit more subsidy into something. I think we want to look at some kind of broader policy that doesn't pick technology winners, but instead says, we have to get to a point where not just 25% of our electricity comes from renewable energy, but what about beyond that? How do we get to 50%? How do we eventually get to 100%? Not possible now, but how do we take down those roadblocks so that we can get there going forward? So getting as much specificity as possible from them going forward. But what we have heard from not candidates but sitting politicians is they want to hear a lot more from people outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota, which is exactly right, because that's where most Minnesotans live. And they need to hear success stories. They need to hear what is really working and specifically what is not working that they can help fix. And I would just say, don't let them get off the hook by talking about, well, there might be another economic stimulus with regard to energy. Or we need some real long-standing, across-the-board policies rather than giveaways here and there. And we need to make sure that they understand that. Yes.
You mentioned asking the politicians about what is really working. What have you seen that is really working?
Well, lately, when I talk to them, I've been using a couple of examples from our work with industrial energy efficiency, and I don't know if anything like this is happening up here in the Northland. But I know we've been on a tour of Faribault Foods down in Faribault, Minnesota, that is a big cannery. So I think about it as, and has been for a long time. And they ran into a problem a couple of years ago where they were using, I think they were using 40% of the water for the city of Faribault, which was quite expensive. Canneries use a lot of water for all kinds of purposes. And the city of Faribault was looking to grow in other ways, like maybe they might want to have more residences and more commercial development. So they both had an interest in reducing water use. And they contracted with a set of Minnesota engineers to figure out how could a major cannery, a very conventional industry, use less water. And they figured that out. But in the process, what they figured out is the way to do that is to use less energy. And so the less time that you need to, the less energy you need to put into heating water, heating cans, cooling down water, pumping water around, is tied into the water use. And so they came up with a plan that the company has enacted without any state subsidies, and supported by Xcel Energy, that says they're going to achieve dramatic energy efficiency improvements and dramatic water efficiency improvements at the same time. And I like that example because it's right here in Minnesota, because it was something that was done, I'm looking out on a beautiful lake. For most Minnesotans, if you ask what's the most important environmental factor to them, it's water. It's not energy, it's water. So I like it when the two are very obviously tied together, which they are in this case. And it's a really conventional industry. It's not saying anything about, let's build a new solar panel manufacturing plant, something that most of us don't know anything yet about. But it's saying, what are the existing opportunities for cutting waste in water and cutting waste in energy? And a second thing that came to our mind is that there is a firm that is based in Bloomington, Minnesota, near the airport, near the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport, that I don't have my iPhone with me, but develops the touch screens for iPhones, which I didn't know that it was a Minnesota company that did that, so I like that because I'm a Minnesotan. But in their factory, their high-tech factory, they also had a water problem. And they also use a lot of energy, and they had a lot of waste heat from energy. And they contracted with a set of engineers in a Minnesota firm and said, how is it that we can reduce waste in our process and use less cooling water? And the company came up with a solution for them that they're about to enact. So again, it's about water and energy use. And in this case, it's about a very high-tech sector of the economy. So I bring those, I'm working now to bring both of our senators to see those firms, because I think it's a very interesting bracketing. The new economy and the conventional economy both have lots of waste, that is cutting into their bottom line. And it's not like anyone has to suffer to do this. It's in fact saying, how can I make my company more robust by saving energy and saving water? And then the question is not for, and you know, I'll try to use them democratically, it's not for Senator Al Franken to be able to crow that this is happening in Minnesota, but for him to be able to crow that this is happening in Minnesota and talk to his colleagues about how to make it happen more universally. To me, that's the key, that it's not just the exception, that very soon these things have to be not exceptional at all, but really very much business as usual. And I think, I'm not a big government person, and I think there are a lot of things that government can't do, but they're setting the rules on carbon emissions is one thing that only government can do. And I think we need to get that in place going forward. And that's what businesses are saying as well. So it's not just me saying it. It's lots of people in the business community saying that's what's standing in the way of innovation. In the back, please.
Well, you have proposed both a political and a technological solution. I think neither of those are appropriate. Our population on the Earth today is 6 billion people. It's proposed that it will probably be 11 billion people by 2050. We don't have enough resources on Earth, the entire Earth, to give everybody the same standard of living that we have today. And part of our problem is that we think people should have that same standard of living. We can't do that. And so therefore, if the population is going to almost double between now and 2050, energy use has got to go up enormously, and we're already past the threshold where technological solutions can bring that back down.
Thank you for bringing up that issue, because when I began my professional career, I was mostly working on water resources, which is why I use so many water examples, and then I became much more interested in climatology, but I like the intersection. But a big part of my training was also in population and population dynamics, and I think it's a critical issue going forward. So one of the questions is, how is it, you know, to solve that problem, the population problem, not the energy part of the population problem, but figuring out how is it that we empower women and girls around the world, because that seems to be the set of solutions that will make the demographic transition. The folks I know who are demographers say that we're well on the way to that demographic transition, but you point out the lingering problem of energy use. This came to the forefront again with news out of China, which is China is now, they're disputing this, but you know, clearly they're the largest energy user now on the globe. But if you look on a per capita basis, they only use about 1/7 of what Americans do. So it raises some interesting conundrums for us. You know, if they were to adopt the same standard of living, which they want to, that we have, it would be a disaster. We don't have the resources to handle that. But the other question is, I like to, when I use a PowerPoint presentation, I like to use bar charts for energy use, per capita energy use for other places, and look at some of the more developed economies in places in Europe. And look at Denmark and look at Germany and look at carbon intensity of those economies in energy use. And it's about half of what it is in the United States. So an initial part of that solution is, well, an overriding part of the solution is empowering women and girls so that they have other options going forward, a longer term solution. But something that needs our immediate attention is figuring out how is it that other countries are able to have the same or higher standard of living as we do, using much less energy. And you can't trace it all to the fact that there's smaller countries in Europe and they move around less. In essence, it's about that they've found ways, they put a price on carbon, but also that they've found ways to cut waste wherever possible, and they've gotten smarter about energy use. And so there are enormous opportunities, as I'm sure you're finding out in Ely, to figure out how do you cut waste and start there, so that everyone's carbon profile is much lower going forward, which would help a great deal. What troubles me, I think, what sticks with me about the population problem is we need to figure out how to make it less appealing for people to have children who can't afford to have children, and in the global sense can't afford to have children. But we also have about 6.5 billion human beings on Earth now, and who aren't going anywhere. And while they're reproducing, they're also using a lot of energy. So figuring out how it is that we can all use much less energy and much cleaner sources of energy going forward. So that the population problem is, I think, the reason why I really get rattled a little bit